1, 2, 3, 4.
So I think when a lot of people hear the term backing tracks, they kind of think, that they sometimes ruin live shows by sucking the life out of it and make musicians, it's less fun to play because musicians feel more rigid and, real musicians don't need backing tracks. And as a professional musician, I've been to a lot of shows in my life, and I can tell you there's good reason people think this. There are a lot of ways to do backing tracks, honestly, it's easier to do backing tracks in a way where they're kind of not done well and don't enhance the live show. It's easier to do it that way than it is really to just make backing tracks that enhance a live show and make it easier to play. But whether we like it or not, backing tracks are here to stay, and there's a lot of reasons for it. One, it provides a level of consistency night to night with both tempos, and for people that run front of house, gives them the ability to mix a show consistently no matter what venue they're in, whether it's a small club or a festival. With tighter tour budgets, it's much easier to have certain things represented at front of house in the mix that maybe you can't afford to bring those musicians with you on the road. It just gives you so many more options with how to, make a live show kind of be something it could never be with the personnel that you bring on the road. And also, Ableton Live specifically, if you're running backing tracks from Ableton, which we're going to be doing today, is a way to not only run backing tracks, but run your light show, run your lyrics, run effects to front of house. It gives you the ability to just do so much, all from just a laptop sitting on stage. And as a drummer living here in Nashville, I get called all the time to go on tours that maybe I can't do. And when I consider subbing out those gigs and recommending other drummers, all of the drummers that I recommend, they can run backing tracks because I would say 90 or 95% of the gigs these days incorporate some kind of backing tracks in them. So it's a really important skill whether we like it or not. And today I want to talk about how to make backing tracks that don't suck. So before we dive into Ableton and talk about kind of 3 ways that I've found a way to make backing tracks that are fun to play with, that really enhance the live show and aren't a pain to deal with, my name's Tim Buell. I'm a drummer living here in Nashville, Tennessee. Today we're in my studio, and I tour all over the world with artists like Cody Fry, Gloriana, Janet Kramer, Jared Neiman, Remedy Drive, all these people. And I also, again, we're in my studio here, whether it's my studio or other Nashville-based studios. I've recorded drums for producers and artists all over the world, and I love to do it. I love to talk about music. The other thing that I love to do is build backing track sessions, and I've done a lot of different content over the years, whether it's YouTube videos or courses that I have, all about how to build tracks in Ableton. So I'm a drummer, and I'm a nerd, and I want to put together, when I go to a show, I want to see the best show ever, and when I'm playing, whether that's drumming or band leading or anything at all, I want to put on the best live show, and backing tracks often can help take a live show from really good to just incredible. And today we're going to talk about 3 different ways that I do that. So my first tip for how to build backing tracks in Ableton that don't suck is running your tracks from arrangement view. If you don't know, if you're new to Ableton, there are 2 views that you can use in Ableton. The first is called session view, which is what we're looking at here. It's kind of some rectangles. It looks really different than a lot of other kind of DAWs, digital audio workstations, recording softwares that you might have worked in before. But if you hit tab, it brings you to arrangement view. And if I zoom out here, you can see there are 2 songs loaded up in here. We're going to get to that in a second. But session view, this view here, is the one I don't use. And session view is kind of nice because it's really easy. You can drag stuff in. It's very easy to get up and running in session view. But it has a lot of drawbacks. And those drawbacks are kind of what sometimes make it a pain to play with backing tracks, because session view, while it's easy to get started in, has a lot of limitations. Like you're not able to skip around songs, you're not able to edit songs on the fly. It's just a little bit clunkier to work in, even if it's easier to set up at first. But I want to show you how to do it anyway so that we can get a feel for it. So I'm here in Ableton. If I expand my kind of main thing over here, we're going to load in a backing track. So if I hit Command Option B to bring that up, I can go over here to samples. I've set up a little kind of memorized folder on my computer so that I can get to all the stuff I need to quickly. And I'm going to go in here to tracks, and let's do this song Commodity. It's at 145 BPM. So before I do that, I want to go over here to this main tab over here, and I want to get it prepared to drop these songs in. So I'm going to hit Command R and name this first slot here Commodity, if I can spell. And then I'm going to right click here, and I'm going to go to Scene Tempo and Time Signature. And I'm going to make sure that's showing. And that's going to let me tell Ableton, hey, this song that I'm loading in, it's going to be at 145 BPM, and it's going to be in 4/4. So I'm going to go here, type in that, and just click here, hit enter, and now that's set up there. and I can drag in my audio. So we have drums, percussion, and a backing track here. So I'm going to go the drums wave file. I'm going to drop that into drums. Percussion, I'm going to drop into percussion. And the track, I will just I'll land it on pad track. So now that stuff is loading. I can close that out, close that out. If I hit enter, now that that stuff is dragged in, and I hit 7, which is the key command I have for metronome, we have a backing track. That's great. We have a metronome. That's great. The issue is when you get into a rehearsal and someone says, hey, can we actually start at the bridge? There's no real great way in session view to get to the bridge. Similarly, if you want to do things like, hey, can we actually extend the intro by 4 bars? Actually, can we make that count in a little bit quicker? There are kind of ways you can do it in session view, but not really. This is much better done in arrangement view, which is why it's what I prefer to use. It's a little more learning curve up front, but it's going to make your ability to run tracks so much more flexible and so much more fun for everybody, whether it's the technical side of rehearsals or it's on stage being flexible with how many times you loop a song in the intro before you go on to the song and things like that. So let's hit tab and get to arrangement view, and I want to show you just a couple of the things that I really love about using arrangement view. So in arrangement view, you can see here that I have 2 songs loaded in and all of them have markers. So if we're in a rehearsal and we go, hey, I want to start at the B section of the first song, I can zoom in here. I can see that it's clearly labeled B section here. I can go a bar before it and say, hey, here's a bar before the B section. We're a bar before the B section. I didn't have to hunt for it. I didn't have to kind of do in session view. There are ways to kind of do this, but you got to guess and it's not quite as accurate, and arrangement view is super easy for that. You can also, if I go hit number 2 and go over to my second song of the set list, you can see here that I kind of have this 4-bar intro here. So let's say we're playing a show and we want the vocalist wants to introduce the song while this plays underneath it, while maybe the band plays some light stuff underneath it. Well, I could come in here and highlight all of this and then go to edit, duplicate time, or just hit Command-Shift-D and duplicate the time, and now it's twice as long. But I'm going to hit Command-Z to undo that because there's an easier way to do this. I don't have to be exact. Maybe sometimes the vocalist goes really quick in this intro, or maybe sometimes they talk for a long time and we're sitting back there playing underneath the vocalist for a long time while they introduce the song. That's okay. I can set up a way to loop this, and the way I do it is through MIDI commands. So I've basically told Ableton, hey, every time you hear this MIDI note, which on this it is F#2, every time you hear that MIDI note, send the playhead back to the previous marker. So if you see right here, when it gets to this MIDI note, it will read that MIDI note and then go, okay, we're going to queue up and go back to the last marker, and that's the beginning of the intro. So I can keep this looping, and then once we're finally ready to move on to the next section, I can release it by just hitting advanced marker after it's read that MIDI note. And this is just one of the ways that working in arrangement view just makes things so much more flexible. I can, at any point, if they go, hey, the outro's too long, I can come to the outro and go, okay, so the down section before we come back in is too long. Like, let's cut the 4 bars before it. I can just come in here, Command-Shift, backspace. Those 4 bars are gone. I didn't have to kind of make a note of it and then remember to edit those tracks and whatever I added in and then bring them back in and drop them in session view. I just did it all right there. Tip number 2 for building backing tracks that aren't terrible is better click track and count and alert sounds. I think that people underestimate how important, if you're going to play to a click track, people underestimate how important it is to not only be able to hear the click track, but also just have it be a click track that helps you, not hurt you. And a lot of people like to, some people like a really percussion sounding clave or kind of percussion-y sounding click track. Some people like a real blippy one, and I think there's a case to when you should maybe use both. But one thing I will say is I don't love the metronome that comes stock with Ableton. And if you go up here, this little button right here is where your metronome is. Yes, there are a couple different options, and you can change from the classic to the click to the wood, and that's fine. But for me, not only do I not love the sounds of Ableton's click track, but it also has some limitations with how you can program it and route the outputs, which we're not going to go super far down that rabbit hole today. But just know that it's not the best metronome. So it sounds like this. And while that is a click track sound, I don't think it's a particularly good one. So what I've done for my sessions is, if I hit this little drop down here, you can see these red regions up here are click tracks that I've programmed. And basically, if I double click on one of these loops, basically I've set up a MIDI instrument called drum rack in Ableton, and I have click track and count sounds and all kinds of samples that I use to build stuff. So I have these kind of blippy accents that I've used as the click track. Which are cool, and some people really like that, but I've also found that some people maybe can't always hear that or want a little more subdivision, so I also layer it with these kind of very percussive, really easy to hear in all environments type sounds too. So you kind of get the best of both worlds, and I've found that, you know, some people internalize click tracks very differently. As drummers, you kind of get just used to playing with the click track, but a lot of other musicians, you know, guitar players, string players, vocalists, they don't work with metronomes quite as often. So I think that having a metronome that just feels really satisfying and kind of, you know, if people like the blippy thing, if people like the percussive thing, does all of that, it's great. So the other thing that will make tracks, you know, just way better, way easier to use is I also in here have another MIDI instrument set up for counts. So if I go to the beginning of this song, you can hear
1, 2, 1, 2, 3.
It's me, but I'm not counting. These samples are, and they're also a MIDI instrument. So I can copy and paste this MIDI region of counting wherever I want to put it, and it just kind of automatically counts in whatever. And that can be really, really helpful. Like in this second song here, if I zoom out and come over here, you can see there's kind of this section in the middle of the song where everything drops out. It's this big dramatic moment. And I've played this live where we actually extend the kind of amount that the band is dropped out. Or sometimes we've shortened it. Instead of right now it's 2 full bars of 4/4, but I've been in situations where we wanted to shorten it to a bar of 4/4 and a bar of 2/4 because it felt a little too long. And that can get confusing because sometimes you do it one way, sometimes you do it another. So what I've done is into the build, I've done a count in.
1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4.
And then there's another count in to tell the band, hey, we're also coming back in. And I think things like that are really, really helpful. A lot of people also like, you know, for me this depends on the situation, but a lot of people also like putting alerts in. So with these alerts, I'm going to come in here, going to go to my browser, and I have all of these alerts here, you know, and this is just me recorded, and then, you know, I make sure that it's loud and clear so that you can hear it. But these are all just samples of me saying things like last time or outro or intro or whatever, and I can drop these in to help the band know what's coming next. A lot of times, you know, you could program a MIDI instrument just like I've done for click track and counts to also just have all these samples in and whatever. I find it just as easy or kind of easier to drop them in as audio files because they're all just here on my computer anyway. So let's see, let's go to song number 2 here, and let's find this alert that says verse. And now, as I play it, you'll hear me, I come on and I say verse.
Verse.
Just like that. And if I want, I can now come here, hit Command J to join it, hit Command R to rename it, and I can name this verse. And now, just by looking at this clip, I can see that it says verse, and if I want to copy this to some other song where I also want to alert the band, hey, the verse is coming up, I can do that. And it's independent. It's got its own track here, separate from click and count, so if I need to turn this down for the band, you know, they're like, we want the alerts in there, but we don't want them that loud, I can do that. It's all super, super easy. So if you're kind of looking at all this and going, man, this is cool, I want to learn Ableton, but also there's a lot going on and I don't actually have any tracks to build and I don't know where to start. I've been there. I was on a gig and I had to build backing tracks and I had to figure it out on the fly, and it was kind of horrifying, which is exactly why I made a course a long time ago called Ableton for the Working Musician that is now a part of Live Gigging for the Working Musician, a course that I offer that there will be links somewhere on the page that you can go visit. But it's a course all on live gigging, and one module, 12 different video lessons are all dedicated to building backing tracks in Ableton because, again, it's a huge, huge part of live gigging. But the course also goes over how to use SPDSX on gigs, how to negotiate pay, how to book shows, what you should bring to a live gig, and how to learn music super quickly. It's got a ton of stuff in there, but it also comes with all these click track sounds you hear, all these count sounds, alert sounds, and even the backing tracks you're hearing are all available when you buy the course, so that as you work through it, you can build along with me in Ableton. And I think that's the best way to learn, is not just looking at people and hearing them talk on a video, but being able to get resources and start to kind of build along with it. So if you're interested in that, that course is available, again, somewhere on the page. You can follow that link, it'll take you to the course, you can find out more about it. And tip number 3 for building backing track sessions that, don't suck is kind of, this is our final tip, but it's one that I get asked about probably the most. And everybody always asks me, how do you make tracks loud enough? How do you have tracks, if it has effects, how do you get that in the backing track session? And this is tough because as a drummer, a lot of times you're working for an artist who maybe worked with 10 different producers for their last album, and all 10 of those producers send you some, kind of just pile of files that you open up and go, okay, whoa, what am I even looking at? There's 10 different guitar tracks, there's all this stuff going on. How do I do this? So for me, the ways that there's kind of 2 things that I find really, really helpful. And the first is, before you ever load a backing track session, before you ever load any files into your backing track session, open up a separate Ableton session or Logic or Pro Tools, whatever DAW that you're most comfortable in for just mixing and things like that. Open that up and just drop the files of that song in it. And whether it's just a couple of stems that the producer provided you or all the multi-tracks, and go through it and pare it down to a couple stereo files that are the most important. So, if your live show needs to have, you only have one guitar player on stage and no keyboard player, so you need rhythm guitar and keyboards and whatever in there, get 2 stereo files of the guitar parts you need and the keyboard parts that you need, and mix those down before you ever load them in your backing track session. Otherwise, things just get totally chaotic, and your backing track session becomes a mix session too, and it just gets really, really confusing. So I always recommend people to kind of pre-mix the song in a separate session and really pare it down to just the vital things that your tracks need to take your live show to the next level. And while you're also doing that, make sure that those files are somewhat normalized and loud. And you can do that by just using a limiter and just making sure that you're turning up those instruments until they're right around -14 LUFS. If you want a free resource, Ulean Loudness Meter is great for just seeing how loud things are. If you want a kind of more premium and flexible limiter, the FabFilter Pro L is amazing. So either of those, just being able to see how loud stuff is, get it kind of loud. You can use a limiter to do that, and then bounce that stuff out, and then bring it into Ableton. And you'll be much happier because things will be loud, you won't have to constantly be turning stuff up, and all that stuff. So that's the first thing, is pre-mix them in a separate session. But the second thing you can do is go through, and once you have everything loaded in your backing tracks session, just make sure that everything is kind of even loudness. And this might be something that you do before a rehearsal, but it also might be something you do in a rehearsal. You might just be playing the backing tracks and the guitar player goes, hey man, the guitar stems in this section are they're too loud, we gotta bring them down. And what I would do for that is, let's say that it's this intro right here that, again, we're playing this under the vocalist talking before the song starts, and they're going, man, this section is just a little too loud, the backing tracks are just a little too loud. What I would do is I would come in here and hit Command E to clip just this region, and then you can double click it and just bring the volume of it down in the clip gain. And you can kind of just automate volume by doing this. So all your main faders are still kind of set at a similar, like maybe unity or -3 or -6 or whatever, but you're changing the individual stem automated volume by just clip gaining things, because that to me is just a really clean way and gives you a lot of control over, making sure each section kind of nothing pops out too much or nothing disappears too much by just kind of automating the volume like that. So whether you're playing for a local bar band just doing a bunch of covers, or you're playing with a national touring act that has backing tracks and the whole thing, like backing tracks are not only a way to kind of problem solve, but they really are just a way to take your set, just give it that bit of polish that maybe not every other act on the bill might have. I think backing tracks are so great for that. But I think if you use these tips, it'll be a way for you to do it in a way that everybody's really happy. It'll be a way for you to show up and everybody goes, wow, this person really knew what they were doing. They built these tracks in a way where I don't hate them, which a lot of musicians end up hating backing tracks because they're just designed poorly. So if you go through and you use arrangement views so you have more flexibility, you have, pay attention to your click track and counts and alerts and things like that so that you're helping the band out. And you go through and kind of normalize, make stuff loud, and then automate the volume so that, nothing's jumping out, nothing's disappearing. All of this stuff will make everybody around you much happier. And for me, I've been a professional musician for over 15 years in Nashville now. I've toured with a lot of people, and there's a lot of people that can drum, there's a lot of people that can build tracks, but it's the people that, for some reason, when you do a gig with them and you get done, you just go, man, it was so easy working with them. That's what this stuff will do. It'll take your backing track session from, yeah, sure, those were backing tracks and they worked and we got through the gig, to, man, I don't know, every time Tim, builds a backing track session, it just feels easier. It feels like there's less headaches. It feels like there's less waiting around trying to figure out how to do this or how to start at this section. Like, he just kind of zips us right to where we need to go and it's easy. That's the kind of goal, because that's what's really going to separate you. That's what's going to make you stand out. So that's it for today. Like I said, I have a full course live gigging for the working musician that has an entire module, 12 lessons. I think the whole course is 11 hours of video content, but module 3 is all about backing tracks in Ableton, how to use it with things like Roland SPDS, MIDI keyboards, all of that stuff, advanced techniques, session view, arrangement view, all that stuff. So there's links available here. And if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out. Yeah. This has been super fun. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you in the next one.